A&S Gear rocks the largest inventory of any paintball retailer. From our massive selection of guns, to our endless supply of goggles, paint, loaders, tanks, and apparel. With your choice of free shipping on orders over $100 to next day, Saturday, or international shipping options, you get the products you need sooner. Shop now at ansgear.com.
Welcome to The Breakdown, brought to you by PaintballAccess.com. I'm Matty Marshall with Todd Martinez, and today we're going to be talking about, I think, an undervalued statistic. I'm talking about survivability. You know, it's really tough to win games, win tournaments, win points if you aren't keeping your guys alive. And in fact, you know, stay alive, stay alive. You hear people screaming that across the field all the time, and it's definitely one of those Achilles heels, I think, of, you know, some of the best players and some of the best teams is staying alive. So before we get into the top 5 players in this category, Todd, what are your thoughts on this particular metric, this particular skill in paintball?
In the professional division of the PSP, players are so aggressive. And if you start losing bodies right away, good teams are really good at capitalizing and collapsing the pocket when you lose it, like say one guy on the break off one side, a guy out of the middle, just really recognizing situations and taking advantage. So if you have guys that can, you know, that run better lanes, know how to get to their spots alive better, know when to gunfight, when not to. You hear really good teams like Tampa Bay Damage especially are always like, hey, as long as we can play 5-on-5, stay 5 alive on the break, we have a better chance of winning than anybody. But, you know, all the top teams like that, Dynasty, we watched the way Dynasty played in the beginning of the season. They were just get out to our spots alive and we'll win the gun battles from there. It's really important, but it's not just, oh, I'm just a guy that gets to my spot and I'm there alive.
Yeah.
There's specific things. It's timing. It's picking and choosing your gun battles. Like I said, the routes that you run. It's a really important statistic, but I mean, the guys that lack experience and understanding for the game are the guys that probably have the lot lower survivability statistics.
Well, we have a pretty interesting top 5, I think, and that's what the point of this whole show is, to talk about all these different things. But, you know, ranking at number 5 is Denis Golev from Moscow Red Legion. And, you know, he played 2 hours, 37 minutes, and 6 seconds worth of game time, 113 points played. They did spend one event down in the Challengers Division. His survivability was 79.81%. I think that next year, we don't really know what Moscow Red Legion is going to look like yet. And I think that Denis Golev's sometimes hit or miss. Like sometimes I think Golev plays well. Other times he gets shot a lot or, you know, doesn't make the right move. But I think that he could be a key player for them. He's been around for a little bit now. But I don't know. We'll see. But he's making the top 5 here in survivability, which I think says a lot for the points he does play well and does finish, because he does get shot sometimes a little early. So yeah, I think that because with the way that Moscow Red Legion has reformed their team and tried to rebuild, a guy like Golev at this particular point with his stint, or in his stint with this team, he's going to need to step up in 2014.
Yeah, I think Golev, like you said, was kind of hit and miss this year. But when the Red Legion was really playing well, Chicago event, West Coast Open, and then they had another tough bracket at World Cup. But I thought that, you know, he and Biernikov were kind of the 2 guys that they really depended on to be those back center guys that shoot people on the break. Golev, we saw him play a lot on the Dorito side because he's kind of a bigger guy, you know, being able to get out there and finish games. And if you got a high survivability, then your team's winning points and you're being alive, finishing them there for him at the end. Yeah,
for sure. So moving on to the 4th ranked player, and actually this team has 3 players in the top 5 for survivability, which is interesting because I feel like this is one of the more aggressive teams in the league. It's Edmonton Impact and Zach Yakmek ranking in here at number 4. Played 2 hours, 55 minutes, and 30 seconds, and 132 points played for Zach Yakmek. Survivability, 83.04%. Zach Yakmek's been playing the game for a while now. The Yakmek brothers, the core of that team. Their father's the coach, Bart Yakmek. He's the owner and one of the best owners on the planet. Really did a good job this year with Edmonton Impact. They were so consistent, really finishing at the top of the brackets in the prelims, and then moving on and doing well on Sunday. They were not able to win an event, but when you're looking at 3 of their players And honestly, these are the guys that do need to be staying alive that are in this top 5. We'll get to the other 2 later on here. But what do you think about Zach Yakmek?
I thought Zach Yakmek had a phenomenal year. I thought that he was one of the guys that really helped them, even though Dynasty ended up winning the overall. I feel like Edmonton Impact was probably the most consistent team because they did make the top 4 every event. And they were just, Zach Yakmek was a huge part of that first squad that was out there that was beating people. And, you know, he's just another one of those guys that is really smart about picking and choosing his gun battles. And this year, you know, he got a lot more opportunities with shooting a lot of people and just not giving up those silly gun battles and staying alive and, you know, really contributing to the team. And when, you know, we talk about, you know, you have three of these 5 guys are all in Edmonton Impact, then we're talking about how they're doing a good job of getting to their spots alive and then communicating, figuring out the game, letting it unfold, and making it go how they want it to go.
Yeah, and with both Zach and his brother Zane, I've just seen such a drastic improvement since long ago. I mean, Zach played a little bit with Dynasty when he first came up before Impact really started the run. Impact did not play in the PSP until World Cup last year, where they didn't do so well. Actually, they had a really bad event at World Cup. They revamped their team, and yeah, I really do feel that that Zach Yakmek has drastically improved. I mean, he was good to start with, but I really see him evolving and becoming a top-level player. So, you know, and then getting into the top 5 here with Survivability. So next up, number 3, and this name should come as no surprise to anybody that's watching this guy play the game for the past 10 years, but Glenn Takamoto from San Diego Dynasty. 3 hours and 26 minutes, 43 seconds of playing time, 124 points played, and a live 83.20% of the time. So, but does that come as any surprise to you with Glenn Takamoto?
Not at all. Glenn Takamoto, another guy that's really hard to shoot. A lot of veteran experience. Back when he played with the Infamous, he was one of those guys that played almost every game. So Glenn Takamoto is a guy that has a lot of experience, has a great understanding for the game, is really smart, and this is a guy that you really want to have out there. He's great at finishing those games. We know that Glenn Takamoto is one of those guys that can win a 1-on-2, a 1-on-3.
We've seen it many times.
So, I mean, you talk about a guy like that, of course he's in the top rankings for survivability.
Yeah.
And, you know, Glenn Takamoto, another big reason why Dynasty finished the way they did this year.
Yeah, they did win the 2013 PSP Series title. Started off with 2 wins in the first 2 events, then a 2nd place at the 3rd event to Houston Heat. But then they kind of fell off a little bit, took 5th place at the last 2 events. West Coast Open and World Cup. So, you know, Dynasty's going to have to, well, you know, I mean, they did win the series title, but they are going to have to take a hard look at what happened to them in those events, adjust. But Dynasty always comes out hitting really hard. I expect them to, you know, contend for every tournament they play next year. Not only that, but definitely be one of the big favorites in the beginning of the year because they're always the favorites in the beginning of the year. Historically, that's how they go. But yeah, hats off to Glenn Takamoto doing a great job getting 3rd-ranked player in survivability. Next up, another Edmonton Impact player, and this isn't in a name that you really hear a lot, but it's Joshua Met. Joshua Met, 109 points played, 2 hours, 48 minutes, 17 seconds of playing time for him, and he was alive 85.04% of the time. And, you know, I think with a team, it's tough to stand out on any team. I don't care what team it is, but you know, there's 10, 11 guys on the roster. You know, only 5 are playing at a time. And when you're playing surrounded by big names, sometimes it's, you know, and when you're a really nice, quiet guy, it's tough. But Joshua Met is one of those core group, one of the Canadians on Impact. And he's just a soldier. He's a soldier for that team, very versatile. Joshua Met is definitely a standout player and definitely a name that everybody should remember too, you know, and a big producer for Impact.
Yeah, he's been on the team as long as Zach Yakmek's been on the team, and both of those two played on the same squad, I'm pretty sure all year. So, I mean, it's a good indicator why they won so many games. They got 2 guys that were good at staying alive. And the thing about Impact, why they've been so good for so long, is that they're really good at communicating. And when you play with somebody for 3 hours, you know, for the entire season.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when you play with somebody over and over and over again, you know, you get to understand how they play. And when somebody's in trouble, if I'm over here and if I'm Zach and I look and I see you, Josh, standing over there and people are dying in front of you, I turn and I help and I start talking. And those guys do a really good job of that. And, you know, again, it's no question why Josh and Zach, you know, playing a lot in the same squad, being on that same team, were able to finish so high in the survivability category.
Yeah, and how it works for survivability is you have the amount, so when your guy goes out to play a point, then, you know, basically the statisticians, they keep how much of a time you could have potentially have played for based on how many times you went out there, and then how much you actually lived. And so the fact that, you know, the #1 ranked guy here in the survivability is a guy that's been around the league for a long time, helmed some great teams. He was, you know, the leader for the All-Americans, Philly Americans a while ago, and that was a very successful team, and been on a lot of top teams. Went to Shock for a little while. I mean, he's definitely been, you know, talk about miles traveled and points played over the past 10 years. This is one of those guys, and it's Tim Montressor from Edmonton Impact, the third guy from Edmonton Impact on this particular leaderboard. 119 points played, 2 hours, 57 minutes, and 23 seconds, and alive 85.45% of the time. So when that was really close, it was actually really close between the two teammates, but Tim ended up taking the #1 survivability player. But he plays a crucial role. You know, I mean, he's also a very good motivator too, which is funny because Tim between the nets and Tim outside the nets is like two completely different people most of the time. But he's just this like really smart, awesome, fun guy, really easy to like. He's one of those guys, kind of like a Rocky Cagnoni or a Yosh Rao, that if you don't like Tim, there's something wrong with you. It's not. I don't think it's something wrong with Tim because I've never met anyone that's had a problem with Tim. Even though he can get fired up sometimes, but I think that's a great asset to him, and he's obviously a great asset to Impact.
Yeah, well, it's controlled emotion. You know, yeah. The way that he gets his team up isn't the same way that he plays. You know, when he's out there in the pits, he's yelling, he's screaming, he's getting his guys going. But when he's out on the field, he's very communicative. He talks to everybody all the time. He doesn't stop. I think it's probably his biggest asset, and I think that's what helps him stay alive, because the more information you have, the better decisions you can make. And Tim Montressor is constantly talking with Zach and Josh, then he's going to know what's going on and can make really good informed decisions, and, you know, not give up those gun battles and put himself in a position to help his teammates. And, you know, he may not be the kill leader or the G rating leader, but I mean, just being out there and having a guy that you can depend on to be alive and communicate and help your teammates be better, then, I mean, he actually played more points and played longer than Josh Wimette, and, you know, only beat him out by a couple percentage points. But, you know, that amount of time that he played and how long he was out there, it just drastically helped Impact's consistency, and that's why they did so well this season.
Yeah, and Impact, again, you know, with Dynasty and probably Art Chaos coming in, X Factor, there's so many good teams next year. I think 2014 is going to be insane. Who knows who's going to end up at the top of the heap, and obviously there's going to be a lot of what could potentially be some player moves back and forth before the actual start of the season. We will keep you updated on Paintball Access. Thank you guys for tuning in here to the Survivability Leaders. I'm Matty Marshall with Todd Martinez. See you next time.
How many countries I've visited, how many miles you've traveled,
how many paintballs you've shot at different people,
how much baby powder I've used, how many hotels we've trashed,
how many places I've driven,
how many guns I've gone through, how much I love the game.
It's all the times that you had to tell your family that you couldn't be there for this or that because you were going to play paintball.
How many friends I've gotten out of it.
That's just why I love paintball. That's why I love paintball.
That's why I love paintball. But that's why I love paintball.
There are massive opportunities, both with the sport of paintball and for your business. If we are successful in taking our sport to another level, unite with Paintball Access in our quest to elevate paintball and broadcast it to the world. There are advertising packages available for any size business. Join us. Advertise with PBA and help us change the sport for the better, forever.